Okay, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all.
Good
And
morning.
let's continue with our adventures in the path of the just. Let me just see if there's, okay, perfect. Okay, so where we left off was right in the beginning of chapter 3. And chapter 3, we're going to delve into the details, the components of the midah that we've been studying, that we've been working on, which is the midah of zehirus, which is vigilance. The way we've been describing it is the idea of living the examined life. Living the examined life, which means instead of just doing what we do because that's what we do and that's what we've always done, we are actually focusing on really being specific about how we want to live our lives and what we want to do and achieve in our lives and how we plan to do it. So that's this amazing midah of Zehirus. And now in this chapter, he's going to go into some of the specifics and some of the details of the component parts of this particular midah. So let's pick up here in our book that we're using. This one, we're on page 52. If you're using a different version, it's the beginning of chapter 3. And so I know we read this first paragraph last week, but I want to just jump in again with this for the beginning. So if one wishes to monitor himself in accordance with the concept of Zehirus, there are two assessments that he needs to make. One is that he must contemplate and identify the true good that man must choose and the true evil from which he must flee. The second area of scrutiny pertains to the deeds that he performs, which he must examine to see if they are in the category of what he has identified to be good or in the category of what he has determined to be evil. Now, this sounds pretty basic, okay? And in a sense, it really is quite basic, but at the same time, there is a real deep message over here. You notice he says that on the first level of scrutiny, we have to contemplate the true good and the true evil. Why does he say true good and true evil? He could have just said good and evil. So life is very confusing, as we all know. Life is extremely confusing. And sometimes things that seem to be good are actually borderline good. And things that seem to be evil, sometimes and more often than not, actually have good in them. There's nothing ever since the time of the sin of the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And now, since that moment in history, the rest of humanity, there is an admixture. There's a combination of good and evil in everything. So even our good actions have negativity in them, and even our bad actions have positivity. So everything becomes very confusing. One of the reasons why it's very hard to know how to be in this world is because it's oftentimes just not clear what is right and what is wrong, and what is the good choice and what is the bad choice. So we have to really, the message over here is that we have to start by thinking very clearly, long and hard. What is it? What is the definition of good? How do I define good in that way? What do I need to do in order to be able to be on the track towards what I define as good? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes we think to ourselves, well, of course, it's a good thing to. I'll give you a sort of big example, a classic example. What do we do when we have a loved one that we bear responsibility for? And let's say that loved one, God forbid, should never happen, is on some form of life support system. They've had some kind of medical emergency and they're being kept alive by life support. Okay, so someone might say, well, look, this is not a life. This is no life whatsoever. They have no quality of life, and they may feel like the best thing to do is to, stop the life support and allow this person to slowly expire and allow their neshama to leave their body. Is that right or wrong? Is that good or bad? The answer is it's not so clear. We know what the halacha says in that case. The halacha says that we can't allow someone to do that in most cases, but it's coming from a good place, potentially. It's coming from a place of what's the word I'm looking for, of rahman, mercy. It's coming from a place of wanting to see this person not suffer or not have to linger in a state where there's no quality of life. So you can't say that a person who does that is doing something purely evil. They may be motivated in a very, very good way, but it's not clear, right? And then there are other things which, clearly seem like the right thing to do, but they're not always the right thing to do, because sometimes you can be harming somebody in the process of doing something good for them. Let's say somebody comes and asks you for a loan. Should I give them the loan or not? Well, on one hand, of course I should give them the loan. That this person needs money, they're down and out, they're trying to start a business, whatever it is, of course I should give them the loan. But if I give them the loan, and by giving them the loan, they're going to use that money and spend it and lose it and squander it and then be even more in debt than they already are, then there's an element of cruelty in doing the act of kindness. But not every act of cruelty is pure cruelty. Sometimes the act of cruelty is motivated by kindness. Sometimes an act of kindness can actually lead to cruelty. So we have to be very, very careful and precise in our evaluation of what is good and what is evil. But once we've done that, that's step one. Once we've done that, once we've determined, in general terms, what we want to do in our lives and how we want to do it and what's good and what's bad, then we have to be able to now take the next step and analyze our actions. And not just our actions, by the way, but our thoughts and our words and our actions, and assess them on a consistent basis to make sure that they are consistent with what we've determined to be good, and make sure that they are avoiding what we've determined to be bad. And this is the basic process of Zehirus. It's a spiritual accounting, and the question is, Les, what's the question? I'll come to my question in a minute. Oh, let's say I can get them yourself. There you go. I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Les, or not, but if you can unmute, if not, we'll come to your question later. Oh, there you go.
I was thinking to posit the fact that there is good and bad versus true good and bad, I think indicates that you have to go outside of your own judgment to be able to get confirmation, that you can't rely simply on what your internal logic is sharing with you.
That's very true. And it's this issue of our inability, or not inability, but our challenge of being objective in our own circumstances. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on, because we do lack objectivity when it comes to our own lives. That's one of the difficulties of being a human being, that we can't make decisions about our lives from a removed position of objectivity. So in terms of this analysis of my actions, my words, my thoughts, how often should I do it? Now, one possibility is that every single thing I say and do, I should analyze and ask myself if it was right or it was wrong. But the problem there is, let's say a person is awake for 14 hours, and they're going to analyze every word and every action that they have during those 14 hours. They're going to need another 14 hours of analysis to analyze the first 14 hours, which becomes impossible, obviously. So what we need to do is we need to think in general terms. We need to have some way of looking at our process of decision making. We need to have some way of charting our growth and determining whether we are heading generally in the right direction or not. And that's really the challenge of making this kind of spiritual accounting. Now he talks about this a little bit more. He goes into some more details over here. He says, now, this examination must be undertaken both at the time of performing a deed and not at the time of performing the deed, as follows. At the time of performing a deed, the hearers requires that one must not perform any deed without first weighing it upon the scales of this knowledge of the true good. And not at the time of performing a deed, the hearers requires that one call to mind the totality of his past deeds and weigh them, similarly as he weighs his deeds when he actually does them on the scales of this assessment, to see what evil they may contain so that he can eliminate it, and what good they contain so that he may persist in it and be reinforced in it. And if he does discover some evil among his deeds, he should then contemplate and explore in his mind what tactic he should use to turn away from that evil and become purified of it entirely. So what the Ramchal is saying over here is that there are two components to this analysis. There's the pre-action component, there's the pre-action analysis, and there's the post-action analysis. Meaning, before I jump into anything, like I said earlier, you can't do this with every single action, with every single thing you do throughout the day. But you have to, pick and choose and focus on the big decisions. But before I do something, we have to train ourselves to be able to think before we act. It's actually something that we work on our kids with, not to be impulsive, not just to act quickly, but to think about what we're doing before we act. So that's step one. Hang on one second, Ben, I'm going to come to your question. Step one is before we make a decision, before we do something, we have to think about it clearly. And then the follow-up to that is we have to set aside, designate time after we make decisions to analyze, just because it was the right thing to do today, and in a week, 2 weeks from now, and a month from now, and 6 months from now, it doesn't mean that a year from now it's still the right thing to do. I'll give you an example and I'll come to your question. But let's say a person decides, I'm in my own growth in Judaism, right? I'm on a Jewish journey. I'm trying to grow in terms of my commitment to Judaism and my observance of Torah. So I'm making a certain decision that it's the right step for me to stop eating non-kosher out of the house, but it's not yet the right time for me to stop eating non-kosher in the house, or vice versa, or whatever. Okay, so you make that decision. So you make that decision on May 8th, 2022. So if on May 8th, 2023, or May 8th, 2024, that's still where I'm at, I'm still holding in the exact same place, then I'm not analyzing my actions. I have to think, and I don't know how often, but every 3 months, every 6 months, I have to reassess, reevaluate. Maybe it's time for me to make the next step in my growth. Maybe it's time for me to take the next move in my Jewish journey, and not to stay where we are and lock ourselves into one level and maintain and remain there forever. We have to keep moving, and we have to keep asking, am I ready for this next step in life? Whatever it is, whether it's in our Jewish observance or our careers or our relationships or whatever it is. Okay, Ben, what do you got?
In this deliberative evaluation and consideration of your actions and where you're at, it seems like the element of time is missing. There are circumstances where time is of the essence, or it's a momentary decision that you have to make, and you might not always have the ability to, really sit and consider what you should do.
Yes. So that's definitely true, and we all know situations. We've all been in situations like that, and we're in situations like that all the time. And those times, in those moments, sometimes you do have to shoot from the hip. But that's where the post analysis becomes helpful, because if sometimes you might not have the luxury of being able to stop and pause and think about weighing everything out and what's the right decision. So then you might be forced just to make a decision. But specifically in those situations, it's very important to dedicate time afterwards to look back and ask yourself, did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? Did I handle this the right way? So that moving forward, when something similar to this comes along, I'll be that much more likely to make the right decision next time, because I did think about it afterwards. Okay. Now, as is typical of the Ramchal, when the Ramchal puts out an idea, he doesn't like to leave it unsourced. He always comes with support from either sources in the Torah or in the Talmud or in the Medrash. Here he's going to bring a source to back up what he's saying from the Talmud and Tractate Eruvin. So he says, our sages of blessed memory informed us of this requirement to examine our deeds when they stated in a brisa, it's a teaching, Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yoser mishenivra. Fascinating statement in the Talmud, that it would have been better, it would have been more pleasant for a person not to have been created than to have been created. Okay, not a very positive assessment of the state affairs of mankind, but that's what the Talmud says. But now that he has been created, meaning we didn't have any choice in the matter, but Hashem brought us into this world, let him search his deeds. Meaning, if we're never created, then we're not going to screw anything up. Okay, you can't destroy things if you don't exist. But what can you do? Hashem decided that it is worth creating us, and we're stuck with having been created. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, we're created against our will, we're formed against our will. So we're here, whether we like it or not. Now that we're here, we have no choice. If we want to have any chance of success, if we want to be able to leave this world proud and leave this world having accomplished what we were put into this world to do, then we have no choice but to search our deeds and to analyze them and constantly weigh them. Others have taught the conclusion of the brisa is saying, let him probe, literally feel with his hands, so to speak, his deeds. So which is it? Which is it? Are we supposed to search our deeds or probe our deeds? And there's a difference. Searching our deeds seems to be more of a general comment. Search them, look through them, analyze them in a general sense. Probe them means more intimate, more deeply probing into something. So which one is it? So the Ramchal notes, page 54, that a careful study of this teaching reveals yet another dimension of proper self-analysis. Now you will realize that these two versions of this brisa, of this teaching, present us with two excellent and extremely beneficial exhortations: searching and probing. Okay, what's the difference? For the searching of one's deeds means to examine the totality of one's deeds and contemplate them to determine whether they include deeds that should not be done, that they do not conform to the commandments of Hashem and his statutes. Or if any such deeds are found during this search, he must eliminate them completely. I'll explain what this means in a minute. However, the probing of one's deeds required by the second version of the brisa refers to another kind of scrutiny, namely, it is the examination even of one's good deeds themselves, to examine and see whether there is any improper motive within them or any bad component that he must remove and eliminate. Okay, so let me explain. Searching, the way the Ramchal is explaining this teaching of the Talmud is search your deeds. Take all your deeds, okay, all the things that you've done in a period of time, and analyze them, which ones are good, which ones are bad. Take the bad ones, Get them out of your repertoire, throw them away, stop performing them, only focus on the good deeds. Okay, now that I've identified what the good things are in my life, I'm going to keep doing them. Now go deeper, take it a step deeper, probe into those deeds and ask yourself and refine this even more. It's like when you sift flour, you can sift flour in a kind of a broad, a wide sieve, and then you take it and you sift it again in a more refined sieve, and you sift it again in an even more refined sieve. And that's how you come up with solek, this fine flour. That's how you come up with fine, refined flour. So that's what we want to do with our deeds. We sift our deeds in this big colander with big holes, and all the bad deeds stay in the colander, and all the good deeds get through. Now we take the good deeds and we sift it again in a more refined colander, in a more refined sieve. And that more refined sieve is, okay, now looking at what we've identified as our good deeds and our good actions, let's ask ourselves, are there negative components to those good deeds? Maybe there's negative motivation. Maybe there's selfish motivation. Maybe there is arrogant motivation. Let's say a person decides they want to give a large donation to an organization. Wonderful. Good deed. Let's call that a good deed. But now he's got to analyze why. Why did I do that? And if he finds out that the reason why he did that is because he wants everyone to know what a macher he is, then he's got to refine that. Next time he does it, he's got to give it anonymously as an example. Okay, so we need to constantly be refining and further refining our deeds, categorically eliminating the bad deeds and grabbing onto and retaining the positive ones, and then further refining them to even find the negative components within the good deeds to try to eliminate those. That's this process that the Ramchal is describing over here. Second. Okay, so now let's continue page 54. Any questions or thoughts up until this point? Great, then we'll continue. So this form of inspection is analogous to one who probes and feels a garment thoroughly before purchasing it, to examine whether it is good and strong or weak and worn. For a garment may appear to be sturdy and well made, when in reality it is seriously flawed. In a similar manner, one must probe his good actions thoroughly to examine their nature with the most rigorous examination until he is left purified and cleansed of all the traces of impropriety. Meaning, things are not always the way they appear. So you might have some good action in your repertoire of deeds, of daily deeds or weekly deeds or monthly deeds. Okay, but now you need to really, really think about them a little bit more deeply. Am I doing this the right way? Going to shul on Shabbos, is that a good deed? It's a good deed, but I need to think about it. Am I going to shul the right way? Am I handling it in the right way? Am I approaching it in the right way? Doing an act of kindness, an act of chesed. Okay, visiting somebody or doing something kind. That's a good deed, but am I doing it the right way? Maybe I'm focusing on too much on me and not enough on them. Maybe I need to look more deeply into, am I really meeting the needs of the person that I'm, allegedly helping? So it's not enough just to look at it on the surface. Ever since Adam and Eve came along and messed things up for everybody, there's no such thing as a perfectly good or perfectly bad deed. Everything is a mixture. So I need to look honestly and analyze carefully so that I'm making the right decisions. In summation, so he's going to summarize here, the sum of the matter is that a person should analyze all of his deeds and monitor all of his ways so that he does not leave himself with any bad habit or negative character trait, and certainly not with any transgression or sin. Now, that's obviously a pretty tall order, I would say not a single bad habit or not a single negative character trait. I don't know. I don't know. But I tell you what, the Yetzer Hara will say, "Oh, forget it. This isn't for me. It's not realistic. Not one bad character trait. Who's he talking to? He's obviously not talking to me. Not one bad habit, not one transgression or sin. Obviously, he's not talking to me. Don't do that. Don't let the Yetzer Hara do that to you. Take it small. Take it in small pieces and say, how about one character trait? How about one habit? How about one transgression? Focus on one thing and ask myself, how can I fix this? How can I change this? How can I tweak this a little bit so that I'm doing it the right way?" Ramchal stresses that these assessments must be performed frequently if they are to be effective. Okay, and this is now he gets into the how often I have to see this, how often I have to do this. Now I see a need for a person to examine and evaluate his ways every single day in the manner of the great merchants who constantly monitor all of their operations so that they will not break down. If you're a small store owner and you own you own a little shop, a little five and dime or something, you are going to make sure at the end of every day that you've made a little analysis. How much did I spend? How much did I bring in to make sure that you're profitable, right? And if you're not making that analysis every day, or at least once a week, or at least once a month, you're going to find out years down the road that you've been losing money all these years. So accordingly, he should establish set times and hours for this analysis so that his evaluation not be haphazard, but rather he will be performed with great regularity, for the benefits of such a routine are great. Don't just randomly do it when you feel motivated. Carve out specific time. If you don't carve out a specific time, you won't do it. That's true for everything. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, so everybody's got their own strengths and weaknesses. You have to know yourself and what you can do and what you can't do. If there's some things that are just beyond your capabilities, you have to realize that and then take action to kind of minimize these bad habits. You're not going to be able to delete them or get rid of them, but you can not make them
Minimize the negative
part of
effect
your
of it.
life and kind of work through it, so that these things do not influence your life on a as much as they might.
Otherwise, yeah. Right, I agree with that. But the main thing is being aware of them, understanding them, being aware of them, and not letting them rule over you without you having any conscious understanding that they're even there, that they even exist. That's the real challenge. For most people, I would say most people they don't even know what their bad habits are or what their negative character traits are. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is me. Take it or leave it. Right? But we don't live that way. We say no. The Ramchal is telling us over here. Think about it. Don't just take everything for granted. I'll give you an example. Okay? Let's say a person, I don't know if this is a fair example or not, but it just came to mind. Eating is a good example. How about eating? We eat how we eat. That's how I eat. That's what I eat. But think about it. Am I eating the way I want to be eating? Am I putting healthy food into my body? Am I taking care of my body? And if I'm not, do I need to make some changes or some adjustments in the way that I'm eating or what I'm eating, or whether I'm exercising or not exercising? Am I ignoring things because I don't want to deal with them, because I don't feel like dealing with them, even though they might be causing me problems down the road? And I think that it's easy just to push forward and to ignore these things that cause us discomfort. But if we do that, we're setting up problems for ourselves. We're just kicking the can down the road, and we're going to pay for it at a later date.
So those of us who are blessed with spouses and mother-in-laws, these are very helpful in finding out what your faults are, and that way you don't ignore them. And it's a blessing that they point these things out to you, so you know how you can better yourself.
Well, I would say there's an element of humor in that comment, but it's actually incredibly true. And in fact, that's exactly what the Torah says when it says the Esa lo Ezer Kenegdo. Hashem says to Adam, I will make for you an Ezer Kenegdo. I will make for you you translate it, I don't know what the helpmate or whatever, however they translate it in English, but what does it mean? Ezer means helper. Kenegdo means in contradiction to you, against you. And the Talmud says, I don't understand. Is your wife an Ezer? Is she a helper? Or is she Kenegdo? Or is she against you? Right? And the answer is both. She is your helper sometimes by being against you, meaning by helping you understand and realize what the areas are. Now, she's not going to call it out straight out, or she might, but you can pick up on it and you can figure it out. And if you're working on yourself, then you're going to try to make the adjustments and changes that you need to make it so that you're, being the right kind of person that you can be. Okay, fine. Let's go a little bit further. So now the Ramchal is going to bring another Talmudic source. This is pretty typical. He usually, he wants to drive the point home, and he wants to show you that these ideas are deeply rooted in our Jewish wisdom and ancient traditions. So he quotes another passage from the Talmud. And this one is from Tractate Baba Basra, where the sages of blessed memory taught us explicitly the need for such an accounting. This is what the sages of blessed memory meant when they stated. Here they're expounding on a verse in Bamidbar, in Numbers, and the verse is Al Kain Yomru HaMoshlin Bo Cheshbon. Regarding this, the Moshelim would say, come to Cheshbon. Now, Moshelim means two things in Hebrew. Here's where you need a little Hebrew background. The word Moshel comes from the word, it's related to the word mashal, which is a parable, right? So the Moshelim are the parable tellers, the ones who speak in parable. But Moshel also means to rule over or to be in control of. Okay, so what does this mean? The sages expound this to mean Al Kain Yomer HaMoshlin B'Yitram, the ones who are Moshel, who rule over, who are in control over their Yetzer Hara, their evil inclination, meaning the ones who have mastered, never fully mastered, but the ones who have fought and overcome their Yetzer Hara, they have an advice for you. They have some advice to give you. What's their advice? Their advice is Bo Umchashiv Cheshbon Olam. Come and let us make a cheshbon. What is a cheshbon? A cheshbon is an accounting in this world, weighing a mitzvah's loss against its profit and a sin's profit against its loss. Thus, we are taught that it is essential for a person to analyze and make an accounting of his deeds to ensure that he will follow the correct path. Now, I want to talk about this particular cheshbon over here, this particular accounting over here. It's fascinating. What does this mean? Weighing a mitzvah's loss against its profit. What does that mean? What's the loss of a mitzvah? What's the profit of a mitzvah? And weighing the sin's profit against its loss. What's the sin? What's the profit of a sin? What's the loss of a sin? If you want to make a cost-benefit analysis, what's the loss involved in the mitzvah, and what's the gain involved in the mitzvah?
I can give you an example.
Yes.
Maybe breaking Shabbos to drive someone to a hospital. You're losing, you're breaking Shabbos, but you're perhaps saving a life.
There you go. So in that case that you're talking about right there, that's absolutely the right thing to do. There's no loss in that case.
Oh, there's no loss. Okay.
There's no loss because in that case, the mitzvah, the correct thing to do in that case is to drive the person to the hospital. You're not even breaking Shabbos in that case, right? Because you're in such a case, pikuach nefesh tocha Shabbos, saving a life overrides.
Right. But maybe you missed the cholent.
That's a different story.
Yeah,
What's
I would
the cost of a mitzvah?
I would think, Rabbi, that the cost of a mitzvah will be the loss of reward for Olam Haba. You missed a chance.
and what's the reward from it? No, I think maybe I'm not making this clear. In other words, I'm thinking about performing a mitzvah. Okay, let's give a simple example. I'm thinking about putting on tefillin every day.
But if you don't put on tefillin every
No, but
day,
what's the cost in doing the mitzvah? That's what he's saying. There's a cost in doing the mitzvah, and there's a loss in doing the mitzvah. So what's the cost in doing the mitzvah?
You have to buy tefillin to start
You
with.
have to
right?
buy
It takes time.
tefillin. And
right?
guess what? Tefillin aren't cheap. Good kosher tefillin are $1,000. You can get them for $600. Any less than that, nah, maybe not kosher. Okay, so $1,000 for a pair of tefillin, that's a lot of money. That's one cost in the mitzvah of tefillin. What's another cost in the mitzvah of tefillin?
The time of putting them on.
Time.
Right, waking up 10 minutes earlier every single day than you already do, or 15 minutes earlier to put them on. What's another cost? Another cost is if you're committed to putting them on every day, then there are times when it becomes very difficult to put on tefillin, like when you're on an airplane and everyone looks at you like you're some kind of jihadist or something. You know, there are costs in putting on tefillin. Okay, that's the loss of the mitzvah. The loss of the mitzvah, or the cost of the mitzvah, is what I lose by doing the mitzvah. And then there's the benefit of the mitzvah. Use the mitzvah of tefillin. What's the benefit of the mitzvah of tefillin?
Multiple benefits.
Multiple benefits: connection to Hashem, connecting my mind to my heart, spiritual connection, connecting to community, being millions of, right? So the cost benefit analysis of a mitzvah is, what do I lose if I do it? And what do I gain if I do it? And when you make that analysis clearly and in a very methodical, thought out way, oftentimes you're gonna do the right thing. You know, now sometimes it's harder. What's the cost of keeping Shabbos? Okay, there the cost goes up a little bit. Not only is Shabbos expensive, right? Every Shabbos you want to make a Shabbos meal and cholent or whatever, it's expensive. But there's also losing out on social life, isolating potential family members, being looked at, you know, in some, who knows what way I'm looked at. There's a lot of costs of keeping Shabbos. What are the benefits of keeping Shabbos? So Ramchal is saying, if you make this analysis, you'll eventually grow in your journey. Now, flip it over, okay? An Avera. What is the profit in doing the Avera, and what's the loss in doing the Avera? Okay, so let's say no one's looking. I'm on vacation, or I'm on a work trip, and no one knows that I'm in some strange town, and I really want to go to McDonald's and have a bacon double cheeseburger. Okay, so what's the profit and what's the loss? What's the profit?
Satisfy your immediate desires.
Do you not know how good a bacon double cheeseburger is? It's one of the most amazingly delicious things on earth. Okay, so the profit is 10 minutes of unbelievable eating pleasure, 5 or whatever. Okay, but what's the loss? The loss is disconnect from Hashem. The loss is distancing my neshama from its creator. The loss is the way I feel afterwards when I've let myself down, because I'm, the losses are real. The same thing is true with every mitzvah and every avera. There is cost and there is profit. There's profit, and we have to analyze and think about that in the scheme of things. No matter how, and by the way, almost all averas, almost all of the transgressions in the Torah only offer you a moment of pleasure. As much as that pleasure might be, it doesn't last. It doesn't last, and it leaves you feeling hungry or emptier and depressed and emotionally down, everything. So and the benefits of or the profit of not doing the avera is tremendous. So we need to make that analysis. We need to think about the profit and the loss involved in the sin, and the profit and the loss involved in the mitzvah. And if we do that, thus we are taught that it is essential for a person to analyze and make an accounting of his deeds to ensure that he will follow the correct path. Okay. Any questions on that? Any thoughts, comments, questions? Does that make sense? I mean, is that?
No, I don't have a question, but that is such a clear interpretation of our lives. You know, I mean, I don't want to react to it necessarily right away, but boy, I mean, such an easy way to evaluate what we're doing.
Right, and you can apply that to everything. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, you know, modern theories of business and profitability and all these, you know, contemporary economic, you know, ideas really come from the Torah. This is a simple, basic cost benefit analysis. This is.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't even have to be mitzvahs. It could just be life.
Anything, right?
You know,
Cost
good
benefit
deeds.
analysis.
Yeah.
That's what this is. That's exactly what this is. Okay, fine. Let's move on. There's another lesson to be derived from this Gemara as well, the teaching of this Talmudic teaching. Now, this directive is given by those who rule over their inclination. Remember, these are the moshlim, the ones who have fought and have come up with strategies to conquer their Yetzer Hara, and they're doing quite well at it. Because this sound and true advice could not be given, nor could its truth be discerned, except by those who have already escaped the domination of their own evil inclination. Now, you never fully escape the domination of the evil inclination, but you do advance in your battle against it. And they've learned how to rule over it. For if one is still imprisoned by the shackles of his Yetzer Hara, his eyes do not discern this truth, nor can he recognize it, because the evil inclination truly blinds his eyes. That's the power of the Yetzer Hara. It blindsides us. We don't even realize when we're in it. We don't even know it. We don't even see it. We don't understand it because we're in the depths of it, and it's overpowering us and it's blinding us. Okay, because the evil inclination truly blinds his eyes. Indeed, he is like one who walks in the dark, and there are obstacles in front of him, but his eyes cannot see them. This is what the sages of blessed memory had in mind when they said, expounding upon the verse in Psalms, Tashes choshech b'hilayla, you make darkness and it is night. Meaning, this verse refers to this world, which is comparable to night. Elaborates on the depth inherent in the seemingly simple exposition of the sages. Let's see. Let's read this and then we can talk about it. You should understand how profound this dictum is. To one who delves into it to fully understand it. But consider the darkness of night can confound man's vision in two ways. Either it will obscure his vision completely. Like when it's super dark out, you can either not see anything. It's so dark that I can't see anything in front of me at all, until he cannot see what's in front of him at all. Or let's say it's dark, but it's not so dark that it will mislead him by producing shadowy images, so that a pillar seems to him like a person, and a person seems to him like a pillar. So too, the physicality and material nature of this world is in fact the darkness of night to the mind's eye. All the pleasures of this world, all of the things all the desires, all the material pursuits create darkness. They blind us because we want them. We're bribed by them, and we don't see straight. And this darkness causes a person to err in two ways. One is that it does not allow him to see the pitfalls that are ever present in the paths of the world, literally it blinds us, to the pitfalls. As a result of this lack of perception, the foolish one walks along their merry way with false confidence, and they fall into sin and are lost without ever realizing there was even cause to fear. This is what scripture means when it says the path of the wicked is like darkness, they know not what upon they stumble. Another verse says a clever person sees evil and hides, but fools go on and are punished. And the third verse says a wise man fears and turns away from evil, but a fool forges on and is confident. For the hearts of fools are as robust as a great hall, and they fall before becoming aware of any obstacle at all. Okay, so there's one level of just being completely blind. I just have no clue whatsoever that what I'm doing and mistakes that I'm making, but that's less common. The more common one is, and we'll finish with this, is the second error, which is even worse than the first, is that the darkness distorts people's perceptions until they regard evil as if it were truly good and good as if it were evil. Okay, there's a little bit of that going on in our culture, in our society today. Okay, and because of this, they become bold and reinforce their evil deeds. But it's not enough that in their blindness, they lack the capacity to perceive the truth and to see the evil that is in front of their faces, but they even think that they have found powerful proofs and compelling evidence born of experience for their perverse theories and their false opinions. And this deception is the great evil that wraps around them and brings them to the pit of destruction. Okay, basically what this means is that when the world gets confusing, when the culture and the society around us becomes, when it loses its way and it loses its moral compass, then all of a sudden things that seem so right and so, obvious and so self-evidently good can all of a sudden become questionable or bad or unacceptable. Things like freedom of speech, for example, which we all, for our whole lives, have always accepted and understood to be a good thing. Now, not so clear anymore. Now, I personally, I'm not getting political and I don't even take sides on this political issue, but how anybody can say that, that taking Twitter out of the hands of people who are going to limit free speech is a bad thing, to me is like, I don't even get it. Just stepping back and looking at it doesn't even make sense to me. Of course we want free speech in this country. Of course we want our social media outlets not to filter out political sides of the aisle that they disagree with. It makes no sense. But for some reason, that's, there's half the country thinks that's good and half the country thinks that's bad. And we end up in these weird situations where things that we once all understood to be good are all of a sudden questionable. And things that we all agreed at one point were bad and were evil and were distorted and were inappropriate or whatever are all of a sudden being praised and accepted as not only okay, but good or better or evolved. We live in a world of utter confusion now. And we have to be able to think for ourselves. And we can't let the media think for us. And we can't let the echo chamber of social media decide for us how we're going to look at the world and what we're going to decide is right and wrong. We have to be able to stop and think and ask ourselves intuitively what is right and what is wrong. And think about it in the terms of our values, the values of the Torah, the values of Jewish values that are thousands of years old, that have survived through every culture and through every phase and every fad of humanity. Jewish values are still here. Things don't survive that long unless they're true, unless they're valid, unless they're based on correct truth. So we need to think about that. We need to ask ourselves, when our values, ours meaning Jewish Torah values, conflict with modern cultural values, which way do we go? Which way do we lean? How do we look at it? How do we understand? Okay, those are just some things to think about here in the Ramchal. Any thoughts or questions anyone wants to bring up, please do. Otherwise, we will call it quits and start right here next week. All right, in that case, thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Be well, be healthy, be safe, enjoy. Have nachas. And see you all next week or sooner. Have a great day. Happy Mother's Day. Don't forget to
Thank you.
don't forget to
I
wish
guess
your
I'm-
mothers in your life a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have fun with Bradley.
Okay, we will. We will. For sure will. Bye. Bye, everybody.